They tryna tell me that I'm good without you. Just stay with the things that make you feel good. But I don't see it saving me. Pretty on a shelf, it's clear to see that I can see right through it. Looking so translucent, being all elusive. That's right. All I want for Christmas is you. Ain't nobody else gonna love me like you. Not entertaining thoughts of the mysteries, all the fairy tales. All I want for Christmas is you. Why? Oh, why? They try to hide behind the lie. We just wanna look good, craving the attention. We don't know when to stop, so we keep going till we drop. Yeah, let me tell you about a little thing that I know of. We can give you everything you need. Oh, just look up. All I want for Christmas is you. Ain't nobody else gonna love me like you. Not entertaining thoughts of the mysteries, all the fairy tales. All I want for Christmas is you.
Yeah, I got you, you got me, we gon' hold it down, ayy. Got my squad, family, no one else around, ayy. I'm feeling blessed, so I give him thanks. We one of a kind, you cannot replace. Got all I need, no upgrade. He made us new, no update. And I'm hoping that you stick around me. Just stay in the circle, we all connected, just like an Audi. When I feel like I'm going off on the rails, you keeping me grounded. You showing me love and taking me up, I'm glad that you found me.
All I want for Christmas is you. Ain't nobody else gonna love me like you. Not entertaining thoughts of the mysteries, all the fairy tales. All I want for Christmas is you. All I want for Christmas is you. Ain't nobody else gonna love me like you. Not entertaining thoughts of the mysteries, all the fairy tales. All I want for Christmas is you.
Hello, I'm Joe Balogh. You may know me for such gigs as 36 years as Ontario's boys head basketball coach, amazing 598 wins. Why not 600? Well, ask that jerk Steve Gray up at Norwalk. At least he doesn't have a court named after him like yours truly. I'm also known for being an OHSBCA Hall of Famer, as well as the executive director of that organization. But enough about me. Let's start the show, starring me. Tip off tonight's show with some highlights from this past week with Brian Skowronski. Let's tip off this show, Brian.
All right, thank you, Coach Balogh. Of course, each and every week right here on the OH Report, tons of high school basketball action that we bring to you live and free. So to show you how we got up to this point of this week, let's go ahead and throw it in the spin cycle, get you all caught up on the last 7 days on our weekly rewind. It's ladies first here on the Joe Show, and we'll begin with some game action. How about Callie Carpenter driving the lane? She finishes a contested layup. Maya Bryant back at the other end. She will spin and score from mid-range, but Kylie Hess swings it to Stotts, who knocks down the triple at the other end, and back and forth we go. Here's Carpenter out to Ella Boughton. She gets the open three to fall. Then Jalen Workman drives and finishes through contact for a tough bucket. Little sis to big sis here, the connection from Jill Boughton. She knocks down a nothing but net three, but Workman and company, the Devils, too big, too strong as they win 66-58. Colonel Crawford trying for 59 straight regular season victories, but it's the Devils who would get out to an early lead, turning some defense into some offense. They would miss this shot though, and the Eagles, of course, they're going to fight their way back. Big dunk right here from Braxton Baker right in front of the student section as he races the roof. But Braden Young, a menace down the stretch. 7 of his 15 came in the fourth quarter as the Devils hand Crawford their first regular season loss in nearly 3 calendar years. Blue Devils still unbeaten. More Northern 10 action, and we've got Upper Sandusky and Mohawk. Here's Darius knocking down a three over Zayden Fry to get the party started, but at the other end, it's Boomer Cleveland saying, look, I can do that too, as he makes a three of his own. Darius now to Levi Lamb, who swings it to Kessler for a wide open three from straight away. Cleveland, though, driving the baseline, he would find Hunter Hayes all alone. He would drill a wide open three. Haynes and the Warriors would eventually outlast the Rams 63-56. Big road win for Mohawk. Worthington Christian at Centerburg here, and we begin with a pass inside for Carell Amsbaugh. 2 for the Warriors there. Now another look inside, and it will lead to a wide open layup from Johnson. 2 of his 14 points in the contest. Later on, Lewis going to find Miller from the corner. He knocks down a 3 to extend Worthington Christian's lead as the Warriors win in the heart of Ohio, 68-48. Take you now out to Fredericktown, where Mount Gilead was there, and here's Callie Carpenter with a little Euro step for 2, but Madeline Elson, a steal and a drive, 2 of her 11 points in the game. You're going to see a lot more of them to come here. She's wide open from downtown. She likes to look, rains home a 3 there. Then Elson with a long 2 as Mount Gilead would come up with the victory. They're still undefeated in the conference. Bucyrus at Upper Sandusky, that's Cadence Isles with a runner to build an early Rams lead, but Madeline Kimmel answering back with 1 for herself at the other end, but way too much upper in this game as Addie Newman gonna drill the 3 from the corner right there. Grace Walton joining in on the action as she's gonna hit one from basically the same exact spot. Isles with the last highlight here, gonna go right down Main Street. She finished with 11 as Upper rolls 55-26. So the girls get a win at home. Could the boys get one? We'll find out. Here's Malachi Bayless from just inside the 3-point line. Eric Gottfried then hitting from the corner at the other end. Kevon Coombs would get the hoop and the harm right there. But later on, Randy Banks gonna get the easy lay-in. Bucyrus would keep it close throughout most of the night, but Ethan Kessler and company were just too much. Upper gets their first win of the season, 73-44. Take you out to the new gym now over at Lexington, where they're taking on Marysville, and the freshman phenom Braden Fogel gonna spin and finish a tough bucket for two right there. Then Riker Bowden, cool, calm, collected, finishes with a smooth touch inside for two. AJ Young now getting the steal, and he would find Fogel soaring for the ferocious alley-oop finish. Jason Moore, he's gonna put it in the spin cycle here. He finishes a tough fadeaway bucket as Marysville would not go down without a fight, but Baden Forup and the Minutemen finished strong and picked up a premier win over a Division I program, 66-57. Sierra Canyon and St. Vincent St. Mary LeBron's James Kids playing against his old team on Saturday night at Nationwide Arena. The Irish turn it over early. Bronny James with a lob to Isaiah Olahim with one of his 3 first-half dunks. Blazers only made 1 triple all game, though. Meanwhile, St. V's was lighting it up from downtown. It felt like Ohio against the world, and hey, Heisman finalist C.J. Stroud on hand to see Kevin Hamilton being named MVP as St. Vincent St. Mary's wins 67-61. Huge victory for them. Could the Cougars keep it cooking inside of the Cougar Den against Colonel Crawford? Well, it certainly started strong. They would build a 13-1 cushion. Heath Cash was extraordinary. Check out this three. You gotta get a hand in his face, even that far out. Now off of the out of bounds play, here's Cash swish from the corner. Big 12-point lead, but the Eagles would start to find their stride. They would come all the way back in this game to take a lead in the second quarter. A 13-0 run for them, and look at that pretty play. Braxton Baker up and under. This thing went back and forth in the second half. Huge threes being hit at both ends of the floor, but Justin Thompson down the stretch was huge. He would help lead Crestview to another victory. They're 7-0 for the first time in a few decades. Finally, last night, Northmore at Fredericktown. There's Jax Wenger to the hole. It was 8-2 Northmore early on, but the Freddies fighting back. Cade Carpenter fading away at the buzzer to make it 13-10 Freddies after one. It'd be 22-19 at the break as we take you mid-third now. It's Wenger tying things up there. He had a game-high 20 points, but Fredericktown would finish the quarter on a big 11-3 run. Fourth quarter action, Golden Knights trying to get back in it, but Brady Lester locks it up 55-47 to keep the Freddies tied with Centerburg at the top of the KMAC. So that's all you need to know about local hoops for both the boys and the girls. We'll take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back with more of The Joe Show.
Welcome back to the Joe Show. Earlier this week, we took a trip to Ram Country with head coach Chris Armstrong and their star player Jayden Jeffries. We went around the arena with Jayden to find out a little bit more about this Madison basketball star. Hi, we're here with Jayden Jeffries, and Jayden's kind of an all position guy here at Madison, and we're just going to take a trip around the arena and ask Jayden some questions. So Jayden, my first question to you, I mean, being a former coach and playing high school basketball, I think when you grow up, there's people that influence you. So I guess my first question is, who's kind of been the biggest influence on your basketball career?
It was probably my brother, Mason Campbell. He played here a couple years ago, and I've been always getting compared to him, so he's probably my biggest influence.
Yeah, I remember Mason. He was a really, really good player. Also, as a coach, I always had superstitions. And one of them was kind of, if we got on a winning streak, like what I ate. So do you have like a favorite pregame food?
I like pistachios. I don't know why, but I like to work for my food.
Your favorite NBA team?
Cleveland.
Favorite player?
Luka.
So you try to model your game after his a little bit?
Yeah, big guard.
All right. Favorite college team?
All of them. I like all of them.
You got to have at least one,
Okay,
though.
Ohio State, but like I like all of them.
Yeah, we got to. If you live in the Buckeye State, you got to at least like the Buckeyes.
Yeah.
You played here at Madison. I think you started when you were a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've had some experience. Who's the best high school player that you've had to go against so far in your career?
Probably Luke Dimba. He was pretty good.
Yeah, he's a pretty sweet player. He
Yeah.
could play. So I didn't really get to see you play in person last year. Saw you on film, and have seen you on film also this year. What's the biggest difference between Jayden Jeffries from a year ago to the Jayden Jeffries we see today?
I feel like I'm a lot more stronger. I got in the weight room. I'm a lot more in shape. My shot is better. And, yeah.
High school careers, you have a lot of memories. What's the best memory you have so far in your high school career?
High school career. Probably that full court shot I hit against Ashland.
Okay. OCCs, it's a loaded schedule. What's the toughest gym you have to play in the OCC, or even on your schedule?
Lexington. Their lights are too bright.
You're not a fan of the new gym.
No,
then.
it's too bright.
If I talked to Coach Armstrong and I said, Coach Armstrong, give me one word that would describe Jayden Jeffries, what would be that word that he would say about you?
I hope he would say humble, but funny.
Okay. And the last question, since we're in the Christmas spirit, what's the best Christmas present you ever got?
A fishing boat.
A fishing boat?
Yeah.
You like to fish?
Oh yeah.
Where'd you go, Lake Erie or?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. All right. Thanks, Jayden.
Go.
Thanks for around the court.
Go.
Around the arena, I guess is what we're calling it.
Thank you.
Time now for a Harter Look. I am Brian Harter, and first of all, welcome to the OH Report team. This is really kind of odd to see you in this setting for so many years, seeing you on the sidelines out at Ontario. Welcome to the crew.
Yeah, I got a quarter zip on and not a suit and tie, and I'm not stomping up and down the sideline, but excited to be part of the team here, and excited to take a look at area basketball throughout the weeks here of the basketball season.
Well, and as we were talking off camera, you were talking about this is a different perspective for you because you're not looking at this just through scouting reports and strategy, but you get to really see everybody at a different level. Yeah,
I think it's interesting. I mean, you get to kind of see a lot of the sets that maybe you've seen as a coach over the years, but it's also you get kind of a different perspective of how each coach is approaching the game, and then you take a look at what adjustments that they have to make. So, and the other big part of it is when the night ends, you just get to go home and go to bed. You don't have to go home and watch any film or fret about this play or that play. So that's been a fun part of it also.
Well, there's a couple key matchups this weekend that I'm looking forward to, weather permitting, first of all. The first one is where you and I will be on Friday night down at Lucas as the Cubs host Mansfield Christian. The other one is in the OCC, and that's where I really want to focus on, is Mansfield Senior hosting Lexington. And to me, these are the two teams that are really the teams to beat in the conference.
Well, I think early here in the season, with what's kind of happened over the last week, they've kind of put themselves as the front runner for the conference title. But I've always said this: you don't win a conference in the first round, but you can lose the conference in the first round. So up to this point, both of those teams have taken care of kind of their business. They've won all their conference games. Both of them have maybe beaten what everybody took into the season as being a big contender, which was the new addition, New Philadelphia. So, Lex went there and knocked them off at New Philly, and I believe Mansfield Senior just the other night, knocked them off in a 40-29 game at home. So, at this point, I mean, this becomes a key game just from the standpoint that whoever wins this game doesn't necessarily win the league, but they set themselves up that they can control everything, the rest of the way out.
Well, you mentioned New Philly, and they're a team that already has 2 conference losses. So even whoever else they end up playing, they can't afford to lose anymore. But as we look at Mansfield Senior, I've seen them live once this year over at Worcester. They're a team that, to me, in their opener, they did not look good. But since then, it seems like they have really gotten better, especially with their guard play.
I mean, and I have not seen them play in person. And to be honest with you, I mean, I wasn't going to be shocked if Lima Senior came in and beat them at Mansfield Senior. But yes, I was shocked at the score. And kind of looking at the highlights of that game, I'm going to assume Marquise was not really pleased with really how they played overall, defensively, or offensively. It looked like offensively that they turned the ball over a lot. And I think you got to give Marquise and his coaching staff a lot of credit because, kind of if you take a look at senior high a year ago, they started out gangbusters, beat Worcester, beat Lima Senior, then I think lost the tough game at Mount Vernon, and then it just kind of snowballed and went downhill. Now it kind of seems like, you started this season, you're kind of wondering, well, are they going to snowball downhill again? And boy, they've just bounced right back and had, I think have now won 5 in a row and have beat, their last win against New Philly, quality team. They've had 3 quality wins here over the past week.
Greg and I were over there last year at the beginning of the season, and as you mentioned, we left there after the Worcester game thinking this is going to be one of the solid teams in the area to beat. The sky's the limit. The expectations are all this and that. And, Marquise Sykes, we talked to him after the game, and he's all excited. And, you got Maurice Ware, this real exciting player. And then, like you said, the bottom just fell out, and they never really could get it back together until the tournament time. Yep. Then they ran off a couple wins, and they started to look like a tough out, but then, they eventually lost that. So this year, and Greg and I were, as we were going over to Worcester, the conversation was who is going to score? Because Maurice Ware is gone. They don't have that go-to offensive guy, but they have got a couple guards, Nathaniel Haney being one. Kyvie Roan has really blossomed as a scorer. They don't really have a big post presence right now. Amon Thomas is hurt from football. He'll be back in January. But they've got guards that can just really create havoc, especially defensively.
And I think that's the thing, the few years that we got to play senior high, then just being able to watch senior high over the years is what's kind of separated themselves from, the teams that they played has been their guard play. And especially their guard play from the standpoint, one, they've always had guards that can just get into you and cause havoc. And then the other part is they've always had guards that, can attack the basket, which is, from a coaching standpoint, one of the toughest things to defend is if you can't control dribble penetration, because if teams are able to get dribble penetration, what that forces defenses to do is you have to help and rotate. Then it gets guys out of position. And then I think the other thing you're always concerned with as senior high is their ability to get to the offensive glass. And although they're not size-wise, they're not that big, when you have that penetration, you get guys moving, it allows their athleticism to get guys to the glass and rebound the basketball.
So they've rattled off, since that opening loss, they have really played well. Now they're going to find out what they're made of, because they're going to go up against a team that was the preseason favorite in the OCC in Lexington. You've got Baden Forup, you got Hudson Moore, you got the exciting freshmen. So now this is an opportunity for them to really see where they are.
Yeah, and I think that's what's exciting about, games at this time of the year, especially around Christmas, is when you have a game like this, whether you win it or whether you lose it, it really sets a gauge to kind of where, hey, we've got a little bit of time here over Christmas, where you don't have kids in school, or maybe you can take some extra time, after practice or before practice to work on kids with individual things you think you need to do. So it gives you kind of that gauge. But this matchup's, really is going to be a fun matchup to take a look at, on Friday night when these two teams match up.
So I'm going to put you in Marquise Sykes' locker room. You have to defend the two bigs inside and the freshmen. How do you attack them with the roster that Marquise has?
Well, I think probably number one, I mean, Marquise is probably going to see if they can handle pressure, because I would assume that he's going to probably try to pick up in the full court and see if he can disrupt their guards from being able to get the ball, into the half court. And that's not to say that Lex is not afraid of attacking the basket. I think they will, but I think Marquise is going to try to test to see can their guards handle pressure, because if he just would go back and try to sit in the half court, that's going to be trouble because of Lex's size. So defensively, I think that's probably the one thing he's going to try to pressure, and especially he's going to try to pressure guards, because he's going to have a tough time matching their size inside. So how do you balance that? Well, you make it difficult for those guards to look inside. And then probably if the ball goes inside, they're probably going to have some type of rotation of doubling guys, hopefully making them kick it out and make Lex try to make some jump shots from the perimeter. But the problem is, even if Lex misses shots from the perimeter, that size is going to be hard to handle, because you're going to have to do a great job, of checking guys off the glass and keeping them off their offensive glass.
The Tigers want an up-tempo game, don't they?
Yeah, I would think that favors. And I'm not sure if Lex would say, hey, we're fearful of that, but I don't think Scott Hamilton's going to want to get in a track meet, with the game either. I mean, the thing with Lex though is they're big, but those guys are still athletic. I mean, it's not like that they're plotters. I mean, all those big guys, they've shown that they can run the floor, and they've also proven, with their guard play, that their guards have been able to step up and make, perimeter shots, and especially, perimeter threes. I think, look at their stats. They're only looking at maybe taking 10 or 12 of those a game. But, if you're making 5 to 6 of those in a game, that really forces defenses that they have to adjust to you. So I'm assuming that, senior high is probably going to encourage some of those guards to shoot it, because, you're not going to be able to defend everything. And I think probably the big thing that they're going to try to do is try to keep Lex, out of the paint inside, and then, push the ball offensively and see if they can create some easy baskets for themselves by getting the ball in transition.
And the Fogel kid is something special.
Yeah, I've got to see him play a little bit in the summer, and I think there's a couple keys when you have a freshman like that. Number one, how are the older players going to accept him, to be a part of that team? Because I think if you're a veteran player at Lex, you're looking at this kid and saying, he can make us a lot better. I think the other part of it is then, how does he fit into that mold, with all the publicity that he's gotten, which is truly deserving, the offers he's gotten, how does he fit into that mold of the team? And so right now, what it looks like, that puzzle's starting to fit together pretty well. And Lex has proven themselves early in the season that they're a formidable foe for anybody that they match up with.
Now, you've had freshmen, when you were at Ontario, you've had freshmen come in and make an impact right away. Was that something as a head coach that you tried to drive in helping them mesh with the upperclassmen, or did you let them take care of that?
Well, I think as a coach, you got to kind of mesh it. And I think one of the keys, if you've got a freshman that's as talented, a talented freshman in your program. I think one of the things, the summer before becomes a key, because you try to implement that in there. And then a big thing we always talked about every season was we tried to talk to our seniors like, this is your senior season. So I think all of us, you remember a lot of things about your basketball season, but usually you want your senior season to be special. So I think if you have really good senior leadership and those guys understand that this guy, that's 3 years younger than you can take you somewhere where you all want to be, then I think you need to make sure that you're bringing him into that mold. And so I think it's an understanding, as I mentioned earlier, the part of that talented freshman, the part of your seniors, that if you bring it together, you can have a special year.
Well, Mother Nature needs to just leave this alone because this has an opportunity to be a great matchup.
Thanks for joining me, Brian. Now let's take a look at the best of the best in this week's Stat Leaders. Take it away, Hayden.
Well, hello everybody and welcome to
All I know is this, my crew don't step. All I know is this, my boys gon' rap. My crew don't step, my crew don't step. My crew don't step, my crew don't step. My crew don't step.
number 5. Carter, 5.8 assists per game. You saw him earlier in the segment. He's a kid with a lot of talent, a lot of D1 offers, going to be doing some good things. And at number 1, Grayson Reynolds, 6.5 assists per game for the Centerburg Trojans, who, again, as I mentioned, still unbeaten at 4-0 in the KMAC and lead the conference. Now we'll switch over to the girls' side of things, starting off with girls' rebounds. At number 5, Faith White, 9 rebounds per game for the Mount Gilead Lady Indian, who is 5-1, 2-0 in the season, doing some good things in the KMAC. At number 4, Jalen Workman, 9.3 rebounds per game for her. From Lexington at number 3, Tatum Stover, 9.5 for her. At number 2, the Mohawk Warrior Emily Klopp, 10.1 rebounds per game. Her team sits at 6-1, 2-1 in the N10. And at number 1, Haley Snyder, 10.3 rebounds per game for the River Valley Vikings, who are trying to compete for an MOAC title this season. For scoring, at number 5, Audie Albert from Shelby. They're 4-3, 3-1 on the season. She's averaging 15, and they are also competing to try and repeat in the MOAC. At number 4, Ava Steele, 15.5 points per game. She's tied with Klopp from Mohawk, who also averages 15.5. At number 2, Brooklyn Mosher from River Valley, 17 even points per game for her, 5-3, 4-1 for the Lady Vikings. And at number 1, Madeline Ellison, 19 points per game for her. She has her Mount Gilead squad at 5-1, 2-0. To wrap things up, we'll take a look at the top 5 for girls assist. At number 5 is Jolie Hamilton, 4 assists per game for the Mohawk Lady Warriors. At number 4, Kaya Wentz, 4.1 assists per game for the Mansfield Senior Lady Tiger, who they look to compete for being one of the best teams in the district again this season. At number 3, Grace Walton from Upper Sandusky. They're 7-1, and let's show you exactly what Grace Walton does. She can shoot it, she can score it, she can dish it, getting a lot of things done for those one-loss Lady Rams. At number 2, Demi Hipp, 5 assists a game from the Shelby Lady Whippets. And at number 1, Riley Concert, 5.1 assists per game for the unbeaten Lady Buckette of Buckeye Central. They're 8-0, unbeaten on the season. But that'll do it. That'll wrap up the Stat Leader segment right here on The Joe Show. I'm your host, Hayden Gray. See you on the next episode.
Thanks, Hayden. We'll be back after this short commercial break. Welcome back to the Joe Show. On this week's edition of Coach B's Ballers, we're going to take a look at the top shooters that I had a chance to coach against in my career, and then also take a look at a couple of the top shooters that I actually got to coach. So the first on the list is John Diebler, who played at Upper Sandusky the last 3 years of his high school career. And John's probably included on every list in the state of Ohio as being one of the greatest shooters ever play. He's the leading scorer in Ohio. I believe in researching his stats, he scored over 60 points 4 times in his career, scored 77 points in a game against Tiffin Columbian. He's one of the best shooters to ever play at Ohio State, and also one of the best shooters to play in the Big Ten. You know, when you win against John Diebler, which fortunately for us, we didn't have to go against him very much, but got to go against him in the tournament. John was one of those players that could pull up from anywhere on the floor, so you had to pick him up as soon as he crossed the half-court line. The other baller that faced early in my career was a guy named Nate Reinking. Nate Reinking played at Gallion High School, scored over 1,700 points in his career, went on to play at Kent State, and then went overseas and played 15 years, with the majority of those years being played in Great Britain. He played on the Great Britain Olympic team in 2012 in the Olympics in London. Nate currently, in researching, is an assistant coach with the Cleveland Cavaliers and is also the head coach for the Great Britain national team. The thing that impressed us the most with Nate Reinking was just his ability to go at full speed, stop on a dime, and pull up and shoot a jumper. I guess a great story about Nate, when we were preparing for our tournament, we had a coaching buddy that was going to play Gallion in the tournament. And during that season, teams had tried to box and won Nate, double team Nate, triple team Nate. And this coach had told us that he said, you know what we're going to do tonight against Gallion? We're just going to play Nate straight up, and we're going to try to just stop everybody else. So I just remember there was 4 or 5 of us in a van, and we were going to scout. And we turned the radio on for the tournament game, and as we listened to the radio, the announcer goes, and Nate Reinking, the score I believe was like 24-10 Gallion. Nate Reinking has 20 points in the first quarter, and we all looked at each other like, that idiot is trying that plan. So Nate Reinking is like one of the best scorers and shooters that I've had a chance to see. The next 2 players both came from Willard, and not in any particular order, but Jimmy Langhurst was a 4-year starter, scored over 2,200 points in his career at Willard. He played at Robert Morris University and now is a student assistant at a Stonehill College, which is in Massachusetts near Boston. Probably one of the greatest games I was able to witness was when Jimmy scored 55 points in the district final, I believe his senior year, against Upper Sandusky in a game that I think the final was 101-98. And not only did Jimmy Langhurst have 55 that game, John Diebler had 55 that game. So Jimmy Langhurst is one of the best shooters that I've seen. And just previous to him, I think Jimmy was a freshman when Nick Dials was a senior. Nick Dials also played at Willard and scored over 2,100 points in his career. Nick went on to play at Ohio State and then transferred and finished his career at the University of Akron. Nick's highest he had 52 versus Fostoria his senior year. The 5th player that had a chance, I guess I would consider one of the best shooters that I've ever had to face, was a kid named Mike McGuire that played at Winford. And the problem with playing that was usually we played Winford. At that time, I think we just played Winford in a non-league game because we weren't in the same league, but we always had the chance that we were going to meet them in the tournament. So he played at Winford from 1986 to 1989. So he only played 3 years as a varsity player and scored over 1,700 points in those 3 years. So if you figured if he had a chance that he played as a freshman, he would probably be well over 2,000. But the interesting thing with Mike is that he scored 802 points as a senior, which is just a tremendous senior season at Winford. As I mentioned earlier, it's just unfortunate. We had to play against them so many times. So trying to game plan against Mike McGuire was one of the nightmares, I had to face as a coach. And then the last 2 players I'm going to mention are 2 guys that played for me in Ontario that I would probably credit to be not only great players, but they were probably the 2 best shooters I had a chance to coach. The first one is Chris Morris, who played at Ontario from 1988 to 1990. Again, played varsity as a sophomore, junior, and senior. Scored over 1,500 points in his career, and had a game high of 51 against Shelby his senior year. Chris could just score in all kinds of ways. He was a great shooter off the catch, a great shooter off the dribble, probably one of the best. And I guess what I can thank Chris for is he's kind of the one that got my winning career at Ontario really started there in 1990. And then the other shooter that I have is a guy named Ben Shoemaker. Ben was a varsity player as a junior and senior in 1994 and 95. Scored just 775 points, which was pretty good for just 2 years as a varsity player. And he helped us get to a Division IV state Final Four his senior year in 1995. But I guess probably the most amazing stat that Ben has is he made over 100 threes his senior year. And probably most remembered that year when we got to the regional and we played Coldwater, then we played Delta. I believe he had 8 threes against Coldwater and 7 threes against Delta. So he had 15 threes in 2 regional games. So those are my top, I guess, 7 shooters, 5 of them that I had a chance to coach against, 2 of them that I had a chance to coach with.
After 40 years of coaching? Well, you retire. So what do? They put a Santa hat on you and put you in a rocking chair and ask you to tell some stories. So story time this week starts with, what do coaches do at Christmas? Well, as a varsity basketball coach for 36 years at Ontario, I think one of the things that as coaches you kind of divide your season into segments. So probably the first segment is your preseason, which is from your first day of practice till the final scrimmage just before your first game. You try to get into things that you think are going to work for you that season. Then you start your games. So typically now your games start the weekend after Thanksgiving. So in this case, most teams at this time probably have 6, 7, maybe 8 games in. So if you're fortunate, you might be with 1 loss, no losses, or you might be a team that had high expectations that's got 2 or 3 losses. So as a coach, I think as you get to Christmas, one of the big things you do is you evaluate. You evaluate what has worked for you, what you need to improve on, and how are you going to go about doing that. Because usually during the Christmas break, without being in session in school, what you're going to try to do is find time, and you may adjust those times to make sure your kids kind of try to stay on a schedule. Because the difficult thing is to try to keep kids on that schedule. And I think what you try to do is you try to use those 2 weeks at Christmas time. Not only are you preparing for games at
when the games that you're going to play during that Christmas break, but maybe more importantly, you're preparing for the grind that you're going to have come January, because January you're probably going to get stuck with playing maybe at least 2 games a week, possibly 3, and then depending on the weather, you could get bunched up at the end of the season playing a bunch of games in a row. And those are usually when you really find out what your team's about, because it just becomes kind of a grind, with the weather, kids getting sick, maybe injuries or bumps and bruises. It gets really tough, and you kind of find out what your team is really about. So typically you might think that coaches, hey, we're going to take a Christmas break, but I'm going to guarantee you probably every coach here in the Mansfield area, there's probably going to be some point on Christmas Day that they're going to be watching film. Whether it's film of a game that they played on Friday before Christmas, or it's film on the next opponent that they're going to have maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. So, for my kids, I think my 2 sons, Blake and Steven, I hope that they enjoyed the opportunity they had to be around basketball. But an interesting story, I've got a good friend named Bob Van Cannel who coaches at Dover High School and is Hall of Fame coach. He's won over 700 games. And Bob's maybe one of the best storytellers that I've ever been around of telling stories. And as we were talking about Christmas one year, he told me the story of when his 2 sons, Matt and Mark, were younger, probably like in 4th, 5th grade. Dover played like right before Christmas, probably the 23rd of December. And I think they got beat by somebody that they probably should have beaten. And Bob's told the story of, as either Matt or Mark were in the locker room, the players were sitting down waiting for him to come in to give them a post-game speech, and Matt or Mark looked at all the players and just said, "Thanks a lot, guys." And all the players looked at him like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, we're going to have a really Merry Christmas with how you guys played tonight." So probably that's the best story I can tell as far as how basketball affects coaches during the Christmas holidays. So on behalf of all the people here at the OH Report and myself, we wish that all of you have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.